For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens lived like animals. They hunted, they gathered, they survived, but they didn't build cities. They didn't write poems. They didn't ask where they came from or where they were going. Then, around 7,000 years ago, everything changed. Out of nowhere, we began planting seeds, drawing symbols, burying our dead with rituals, and praying to gods. In less than a blink of evolutionary time, we invented the wheel, mapped the stars, built temples that still stand today. It's called the Great Leap Forward, but no one can explain why it happened, or how it happened so fast. Why would a species spend 193,000 years doing nothing but survive? Then suddenly become philosophers, astronomers, architects. They say it was natural evolution, but evolution is slow. This wasn't slow. This was sudden. Something turned on inside us, a switch was flipped, and that's the secret they won't discuss. Because to admit what really happened would destroy the narrative of random progress. Archaeologists found temple sites that predate agriculture like Göbekli Tepe, built 11,000 years ago by hunter-gatherers who should have had no knowledge of advanced design. But they carved 3D animal reliefs aligned to constellations, lifted multi-ton stones, and buried the whole complex on purpose. Why? In the Iranian plateau, cities like Shari Sokta and Jiroft reveal signs of social classes, medicine surgery, and proto-writing systems. These people didn't stumble into civilization. They remembered something we forgot. And here's the forbidden truth. The rise of human consciousness wasn't just a biological event. It was a transmission, a moment when something entered or awakened inside the human brain. You weren't just born from biology, you were activated. And that activation didn't come from evolution alone, it came from somewhere else. Some say it was divine, others say it was extraterrestrial, but whatever it was, it left fingerprints all over ancient history. The Quran says God breathed his spirit into Adam. Nafakhtu fīhi min ruhi, not created by breath, but awakened by it. That moment wasn't poetic, it was technological, a transfer, a spiritual ignition. The first spark of self-awareness, the birth of inner dialogue, the ability to imagine the future, regret the past, and ask, why? Adam wasn't the first human body, he was the first human soul. The first to hold ilm al-asma' kullaha, the knowledge of all names, not just labels, but archetypes, blueprints, design patterns for the fabric of reality. This was the true forbidden knowledge, and it didn't vanish when Adam died. It was passed down through a bloodline, to Seth, to Idris, to Noah, to Abraham. It wasn't just genetics. It was memory encoded into the seed of humanity, and in some of us, that code still pulses dormant, but waiting. Now let's go deeper in the Book of Enoch. A group of beings called the Watchers descend to Earth. They do more than watch, they interfere. They teach forbidden arts, alchemy, metalwork, divination, astrology, and the crafting of weapons. They merge with humans and birth hybrid offspring, the Nephilim giants. Half divine, half human, too powerful to be controlled. This wasn't mythology. It was memory myth encoded into symbols because truth was too dangerous. The flood that followed wasn't just divine punishment. It was a reset, a containment protocol to purge the world and bury the technology of consciousness manipulation. The Book of Enoch was banned from the Bible, erased from religious canon. Why? Because it explained too much. It showed that ancient humans didn't evolve knowledge. They received it from intelligences, seen and unseen, some divine, some not, but all powerful and all hidden from you. Next, we'll trace the moment when humanity stopped wandering and started building, because what came next wasn't just survival, it was civilization itself, and the rise of something much bigger than instinct or shelter. It was the beginning of human will. After the spark of consciousness came the first question. Now that I am aware, what do I build? And the answer was civilization. Around 7,000 years ago, a new pattern emerged across the planet. Hunter-gatherers stopped moving. They planted, they built, they organized. But here's what no one explains. These weren't just huts around a fire. They built cities aligned with stars. They laid out irrigation systems with engineering precision. They invented calendars before they invented alphabets. In Alam in Sumer, in ancient Iran, in Egypt, civilization didn't emerge randomly. It appeared simultaneously, as if following a hidden template. It's as if someone, or something, gave the blueprint. Think about it. The wheel appears around 3500 BCI in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, separated by over 2,000 kilometers, yet nearly identical in design. The first written laws, like the Code of Ur-Nammu, appear with fully formed legal systems, not experiments but structured justice. The plow, the granary, the kiln, the ziggurat. These aren't the inventions of trial and error, they're signs of memory. Someone remembered what came before, even if no one said it out loud. And here's where it gets darker. The early priest-kings weren't just political leaders, they were guardians of sacred knowledge. They ruled through mystery. Their authority came from the gods, but those gods were always distant, unseen, yet obeyed. What were they hiding? In Sumerian tablets, gods like Enki and Enlil give humans the gifts of civilization. But with a warning, obedience brings order. Disobedience brings chaos in the Quran. God teaches Adam the names but warns of deception and a presence already watching him. These stories aren't isolated, they are parallel memory streams, retelling the same forbidden event through different lenses and the one pattern that repeats. Every time humans rise, a catastrophe follows, a flood, a fire, a fall, as if something or someone doesn't want us to reach full awareness again. So what if the rise of civilization wasn't evolution but interruption, a second awakening, guided, directed, but also contained, because a conscious human is a dangerous human. Next, we dive into the hidden bloodlines, the transmitters of memory, and the carriers of the code. You were taught that prophets came and went, but what if they never left? What if their code, their frequency, still lives in some of us today? The ancients didn't speak of bloodlines for prestige. They spoke of preservation of a sacred chain carrying knowledge through flesh. In the Quran, Adam is taught the names, and through Seth, through Idris, through Noah, through Abraham, that knowledge travels, not like a story, but like a seed. These weren't just wise men, they were carriers, human hard drives encoded with divine data. Idris, also known as Enoch, doesn't die, he is lifted, ascends. Why? Because he holds something too powerful to be buried. The Book of Enoch calls it the Book of the Watchers, but in Islamic tradition, it's Ilm min al-Kitab, the knowledge from the book. Not the whole book, but a fragment, and with that fragment, Idris could bend time, calculate dimensions. He understood the structure of the universe. That's why in ancient Mesopotamian lore, there are rulers called Apkallu, 7 sages, half human, half divine, sent to restore civilization after each cataclysm. They weren't myth, they were memory, just like Noah. The man who wasn't chosen just to survive the flood, he was chosen to preserve the genetic code of both human and divine essence. His sons, Shem, Ham, Japheth, weren't just founders of nations. They were transmitters of soul lines. From Shem came the Semitic peoples, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. From Ham, the Nile civilizations, the African mysteries, the sacred arts of Kemet and Cush. From Japheth, the Indo-Europeans, the carriers of fire, of metallurgy, of the languages that rule today's world. And here's the dark secret. This wasn't random spread, it was dispersal, a calculated seeding of awareness, of memory, to ensure it could never be erased again in one blow. But over time, that memory dimmed, the code corrupted, the guardians fell asleep. Now, fragments remain in stories, in dreams, in forgotten languages, and in you, because if you're still watching this, there's a reason you remember, and what's buried can still be reawakened. Next, we'll reveal how the first kings may have used that knowledge not to guide humanity, but to rule it. The knowledge passed from Adam to Idris, from prophets to bloodlines, was meant to awaken humanity, but it didn't stay in pure hands. Something changed. The keepers of wisdom became kings, and kings became gods. They built ziggurats to reach heaven, not to worship, but to dominate. They declared themselves divine, spoke in coded language, used astrology to rule time, used architecture to trap energy. What was once the breath of the soul became the tool of empire. In Sumer, priest kings ruled by the stars, claiming messages from the heavens, but their tablets didn't just record taxes. They mapped celestial alignments, tracked cosmic events, and encrypted codes of power. In Egypt, pharaohs used sacred geometry to construct monuments that aligned perfectly with star systems like Orion's belt and Sirius. These weren't tombs, they were resonance chambers built to hold a vibration, a signature. Why? Because they understood something we've forgotten, that sound, geometry, and consciousness are connected, and if you control all three, you control minds without chains. Even today, these systems remain in flags, in dollar bills, in sacred architecture, hidden in plain sight. Modern temples of law and finance still echo the same proportions, the same angles, the same math of control. We stopped receiving knowledge and started worshiping its symbols, and the greatest trick of all, convincing us it was progress. But deep inside, some remember, civilization wasn't born of bricks and war. It was born of a breath, a whisper of the infinite passed through the blood of prophets, stolen by kings, buried under empires, but not lost, because the code isn't just in stone, it's in you. And in the final chapter, we uncover what this awakening means for now, this age, and the leap that's already happening again. They thought they buried it, the spark that made Adam different, the breath that turned a body into a soul. They thought they burned the books, silenced the prophets, and turned symbols into distractions. But memory doesn't die, it waits, and now, thousands of years after the first leap, another is beginning. Look around you. People are waking up, not just spiritually, but biologically. Science calls it neuroplasticity, epigenetics, DNA activation. But the ancients had a simpler word for it: remembrance. They said the soul forgets but can remember if called. The same code that lit the mind of Adam, that traveled through Seth and Idris, through Noah and Abraham, is flickering again, and this time, it's global. That's why they distract you with dopamine, with division, with debt, with entertainment. Because if you stop, if you breathe, if you ask, who am I?
Where did I come from? What's inside me?
You might remember. And if enough of us do, the spell breaks. You weren't meant to be ruled. You were meant to create. You weren't built for instinct. You were built for vision. And the leap, the real leap, doesn't happen on a timeline. It happens in a moment when one human decides to wake up, and that human might be you. So now you know that your story didn't begin in a cave or with fire. It began with a breath, a name, and a memory. Don't let it be buried again.